Welcome to Come and See, your podcast for finding truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. With host and founder Richard Case and co-host and retreat leader Kathy Ricconi. Today is our special guest day, where we will hear from a friend of the ministry who will share their insight and stories on truth in this chaotic world. And now your host, Richard Case.
Welcome, Kathy. It's guest day, guest Thursday day, which we're excited. We have Rich and Janet Cocchiaro. They're from New Hampshire, actually not too far from you. But,
right? It's great to see you guys.
But they're live in studio here in Colorado because they're visiting for attending our taping of our curriculum for our online courses. We're doing 10 more topics over the next 2 weeks. Rich and Janet are going to be part of that. You're going to be part of that. You're coming. You're flying
yes,
out.
I'll be out next week. So looking forward to it.
We have our leaders coming from all over the country. So thank you, phone. And so we're excited to have you guys. Welcome, Rich and Janet, and
it's good to be here.
Very, very good friends from New Hampshire. Been leaders in Living Waters now, going on 10 years, and they're going to share their story. And maybe to start with, tell us a little bit about how you each came to know Christ. So, Rich, why don't you share a little bit how you came to know Christ?
Sure. I just remember at a very early age that I felt the Spirit in my heart. And, I went to church and I went to catechism, and, there was introduction as to who is God. And so I was always interested, but there was something missing, I felt. And I didn't have a grand revelation where all of a sudden the light, shone, and all of a sudden, that was the moment at which I became a Christian. It was a gradual process. And so I nurtured it through the years and, tried to find ways to accomplish that. And I knew it had something to do with the Bible. And so, I, at various times, I didn't even get a Bible until I was like 21. Somebody had quoted scripture to me, and I go, "How do you know that?" And they said, "It's in the Bible." I go, "You have your own Bible?" And because we were taught that the Bible was that big book on the altar, and nobody could touch that but the priest. So, I didn't have they had gone out and gotten me my first Bible. And I tried to read it. It didn't seem to make sense. I started on page 1, and so I'll leave my story there, and then maybe go to Janet. And
you said you kind of your personal relationship.
Yeah, it did. So I knew it had something to do with the Bible. We had been invited to go to an abiding retreat with Rich 10 years ago, anyways, and I was interested because I was hungry, and went to this first retreat, and it was almost immediate. As soon as he started, he said, "Do you want to have a personal relationship with Jesus?" And I said yes, and so we got right into the abiding retreat, and for me it was like a light switch being flipped on, and things were pouring into my heart. It was literally like drinking out of a fire hose.
Yeah.
It was just so much, and my head was, it was hard for me to wrap my mind around everything that was going on.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we'll share about that. We'd love to hear more about that. Janet, how about you? How did you come to know Christ?
Like Rich, it was just something that was church was a big part of my life growing up. So I was always in church. I was very involved with the church all through high school. And a lot of it was about the fellowship, about the community. I think that was probably the most important part to me at that point. And when I went to college, I stopped going. I mean, we just sort of drifted away. And when Rich and I got together, we were going to church sort of intermittently, but I would say that I came back to getting interested in it at about the time that our kids were born. And then we started getting actively involved with being part of a church community again. But But like Rich, I think it took, going through the process of abiding to really have that experience of understanding there's a personal relationship. It's almost like any friendship. It takes years for friendships to develop, and all those other years were sort of like the base. And
right. Yeah, that's beautiful. And you've mentioned you've been married, are married.
As far as I know, we're still married.
Yeah, are you guys still married?
Yep.
Okay. So far today, right?
Right. Check it.
And you have kids. So tell us how many years have you been married, and what about your children?
We'll be married 39 years this year, and we're knocking on that 40 years.
Yeah.
That's beautiful.
Exciting.
Beautiful.
And we have 2 sons who are in their 30s, and they're both married. And the younger one is expecting his first child in about 2 weeks. So
he and his wife are
together. So
you mean the wife's involved with that?
His wife's involved with that, yes. And so
is this grandbaby number 1 then?
This is grandbaby
for
number
both
1.
sides.
So we are on on the cusp of becoming grandparents first time, which is very exciting.
That'll be exciting.
Yeah.
And they shared with us about that it's actually imminent, right? It's
by August 1st, yeah. So very soon.
So we there's a bet of date and the weight. And so I've Linda and I put hers in. I put mine in. You guys got yours, right? And
I need to put mine in.
Yes, absolutely. Mine's the 29th, and it's going to be 7 pounds 2 ounces. That's
very good. And this is a little girl, right? A little girl.
It is.
That's awesome. So sweet.
Winners, you get first prize. What is first prize?
I think you get to have a relationship with Ava growing up. That's going to she's going to be somebody special.
That'll be fun. And her name is Ava.
It is Ava. Well, it started out they were testing names, and they didn't quite have a name. And Janet said, "Well, if you don't have a name, I'm going to nickname her Sweet Pea." And
love it.
And they kind of said, "Wow, that's kind of interesting." And all of a sudden, everywhere we looked, there was, Janet was in a checkout line, and she got a little book called "I Love My Little Sweet Pea," and a Market Basket had a bag of peas called Sweet Peas, and Janet's growing a plant outside the house that's called Sweet Pea, and everywhere we looked, it was Sweet Pea. Even to the point where our other daughter-in-law, Danny, was, totally didn't know this thing about Sweet Pea. She got a little jumper type thing that said Sweet Pea on it.
I love it. I love it. Well, mark me down for Sweet Pea is coming July 27th, and she's going to be 7 pounds 7 ounces.
You got it. 7 sevens. I like that.
7-7.
Yeah.
Mine's 5-5. 25th and 7-5.
Yeah.
All right.
It'll be fun. It'll be fun to see. Being married. Tell us each of your perspective. How did you meet, and what led to you deciding, we're gonna get married?
Well, I think our experience has been that the best relationships have just started out of a friendship, and I first met Janet when she and her roommate was evening, and the street lamp had just come on, and she was being very dramatic about how difficult calculus was. And
you guys were in college then?
We were in college. We met at Bates College in Lewiston, Maine, and she was upset about that, and I said, "Well, I can help with that. I'm pretty good at math." And so
what did you major in?
Economics.
Economics.
Yeah.
Oh, very good. So you saw a cute damsel in distress and figured you could come to the rescue.
Well, yeah, but just trying to be a friend, and we actually just maintained a friendship throughout college. We didn't date or anything like that, but we were just friends. Actually, like you, undergraduate economics, I went to NYU for my MBA. So.
Oh, excellent.
So did you? So that's when you. After that, you went into. By the way, where did you start in your?
I started working for what they called at the time a Big 8 public accounting firm, Coopers and Lybrand in Boston, and took the exam, and I ultimately got certified after I moved to Florida. But started there, and then met a guy who was good friends with Dave Dunkel, and we hit it off. And we were the founders of what is now called K-Force.
Yeah.
At the time, it
so
started.
How did you and Dave? We had Dave on the show before, so the listeners have met Dave and Melissa. How did the two of you end up meeting? How did y'all connect?
Just at work. We kind of were in some meetings together. We met at work, and we hit it off, and it was a great relationship, and became a personal relationship, not just a work relationship. And ultimately, when Dave left Coopers and Libran to go start Romac Tampa, and a few months after he started, that was back in late 80, early 81, I got a phone call saying, what do you think about becoming a professional recruiter? And I hadn't thought about that at all, but I thought it was be kind of a cool thing to start a business with somebody who was friends.
Yeah.
And so we did that.
K-Force wound up being a $1 billion publicly traded company.
It is.
Pretty cool.
Yeah.
God's gift.
You can remember back. I've been part of startups, and success is not to that level, but it's always interesting, isn't it, to remember back when?
Yes.
Those days of just starting out. Is this ever going to make it? And through your leadership, it did. And Janet, how about you? What's your perspective on how you guys met and how you came to know?
Well, first, I want to say that I always considered what they were doing monopoly money. I just didn't think it was real.
The stock didn't really matter, and we actually lived our life that way. It was like, that's over here, and if it ever has any value, that's great. But we have to live within our means.
Yeah.
So that wallpaper didn't mean much to you, right?
That wallpaper didn't mean much. But anyway, we met at Bates, and we had a great friendship. But it was a friendship. It was nothing romantic about it. And after we graduated, I sort of started traveling around the country. Went all the way out. Thought I was going to go live in Oregon. Once I got there, decided I wasn't. But when I was coming home, I called Rich Collect from New Orleans one night. Totally, I just called him. Collect, this man who had no money, living in a dorm in New York City. And he accepted the call, and I asked if I could come and see him on my way home, and he said yes. So it was like coming home. I came into.
Now, had you guys stayed connected during that time that you were traveling, or how did that play out?
Not particularly. No, I mean,
okay.
I was hitchhiking and getting rides with people and so forth. So I was pretty, loose at that point. So I was not.
I would use those words.
I was loose in terms of my moving around the country. I think because those are before the days of cell phones. I think I had to call to call my father periodically to let him know I was still alive.
By the way, this was also the days before the internet.
So there was no internet. Yeah, it was very different. But anyway, the point was that coming home was when I came into New York and Rich was there, and it was sort of the beginning of it changed.
Yeah.
And as we noted, we've been through 2 long-distance relationships because he was in school in New York and I wasn't. And then afterwards, we spent some time together in Boston. We were in Boston together until David decided that Tampa was a good place to go, and I didn't know where Tampa was. So and I was finishing up school, so we had another year. And so we got married when I moved to Tampa.
So after you graduated.
After I graduated.
Rich was already down to Tampa.
Yeah.
And he was, so during a couple years, he was in New York, and you're in...
I was in Western Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Wow.
And you had to deal with that.
Yeah.
He held together, and then he goes to Tampa and deal with that again, right?
And I dealt with that again.
Wow.
Yeah.
And I was,
how was first year of marriage taking this New England girl out of New England and going to Tampa?
I was not real happy being in Tampa. Tampa was hard. Tampa was really hard. I was really wanted to leave Tampa as soon as I got there, but we stayed there for 4 or 5 years, and then he had an opportunity. I don't know if it was an opportunity. It was
nobody else would touch it. We had an office that was in flames and going down fast, and Dave said, "Why don't you go up and see what we need to do about it?" And Janet looked at me and said, if an opportunity came up north, you really should consider it.
So we ended up in Chicago for 12 years. It was it was a great
Oh,
place
wow.
to be. Yeah.
And you were in what year were you in Chicago?
It was '86. It was right after the Super Bowl shuffle,
Yeah.
and Michael Jordan was just coming in.
Yes.
So
Oh, it's a good time to be in Chicago
Yeah.
then, right?
it was great.
Nice.
It's a great time to be in Chicago.
Yeah.
And we were there until '98.
Linda and I, kind of grew up in that area. And we were high school sweethearts there, and got married, and we lived in Chicago up until '82. Then I moved out to Colorado. We missed it. Although I had a client in Chicago when you were there, and you talked about Michael Jordan. So he had tickets on the floor, right behind the first seats, right behind the guest visitors bench. So I get to go to a lot of these games to see Michael Jordan, and as characteristic, I don't know if any of you watched the thing, The Last Dance, but he was pretty
Yes.
intense.
Yes, he
Oh,
was.
that was so good. Yeah.
And his perspective is, we're going to win, and you could see it. So I'm sitting behind the bench, and they would have these timeouts, and every single timeout, he would walk down to the visitor bench and he'd always say the same thing: "Don't bother coming out on the floor. We're going to beat you." And it was
I love it.
it was because I could hear it. I could hear him say it, and it was really interesting and pretty fun. Did you ever go to a game?
Oh yeah, actually, just serendipitously, one of the cheerleaders, a Lovable,
Yeah.
ended up, and that's a whole story unto itself. Ended up being our office manager.
Oh, cool.
And so,
Oh,
and
how funny.
she was athletic and bright, and and she asked me, would you like to meet Michael? And I went, Michael? He goes by Michael, and I went, that Michael?
That Michael.
Absolutely. And she brought us in, into the locker room, and
Oh, neat.
I was humbled.
Oh, that's so
He
cool.
was amazingly generous with his time, and just very personable. It was wonderful to meet someone like that.
Yeah. Did you?
And she had tickets. Gave it. So
Yeah.
we were not
Oh,
sitting
that's
down
so
or
fun.
behind the bench. We were up in the rafters.
We probably were.
We
Could have
probably
been.
were. We saw some playoff games, and
Yeah.
and actually, funny story about Dave. They were watching the playoffs with the Bulls, and it flashed to Debbie, who was a Lovable, and he goes, he's talking to his guys down in Tampa. He goes, that Lovable, she works for me.
And you said, Dave, she works for me.
I know better to I pick my fights.
Okay. Yeah. Was there anything better than experiencing the introduction at the game with that music?
That was fabulous. It was so exciting.
It was
Very exciting.
electric. Every single game, that music.
And the announcer,
And
his
then
voice and
announcer,
the intensity.
And now from North Carolina, Michael Jordan, and the place would go crazy. And the fun thing is we get to see that, is that you could see how incredibly talented he was. That there'd be, because he'd try to get the players kind of in the game and play the game. And then there'd be come the fourth quarter, and they might be up a little bit and down a little bit. And it was like, okay, that's enough. That's it. We're going to win. That's it. I personally never saw them lose.
Well, it was actually, it's funny you should say that, because they had Michael Jordan's number, particularly daily in Detroit. And this is his story of transformation, which has become kind of a very important thing in our lives. But he was able to go out, and he would take over a game, and Daly, the coach of Detroit Pistons, he would say, okay, I see what this guy does. And he actually wrote a book called Jordan Rules.
Yeah.
and this is how to beat Michael Jordan. And it basically was he's going to score a certain number every time, but let's cut off his access to the rest of his team, which they did successfully. So early on, he was very frustrated. He'd have great numbers, but they weren't
That's
winning.
right.
And
Weren't
it took the
winning.
right coach, the right leader, and he said Phil Jackson was that leader. He said, "Do you want to win a ring?" Yes, I do. Are you willing to get outside of yourself and involve the other team members? And he did. And once he understood that, then he became not only the best scorer, but he was best on assists, best MVP defense, all of these different things. He encouraged all of the players on his team to be better, and they became the Bulls, and they were really hard to beat, and not only did he transform as a professional, but his whole team transformed into something quite different.
Yeah. And as you talk about transformation, you describe that your Christian life, abiding is switch into this personal. Describe a little bit about how that happened, and we've set you up, Janet, Kathy, and I with. You're going to hear from Janet, somebody that had some skepticism about this, which you can share. But how did abiding? What did that experience? That how did you come to happen?
Well, I mean, part of it was just you and I developing a trust relationship, because I didn't know you all that much, and there were these TV evangelists that they have their own agendas, and if you call within 30 minutes, anyways, I had no idea who you were, so we were developing our relationship. But more importantly, you said, do you want to have a personal relationship with Jesus? And the answer was yes. And he said, well, let's go into the Word. And so that connected me to the Bible, and it was a flood.
Yeah.
A flood. And it's been a flood, and it continues to be a flood. You never get to the end of it.
Yeah, and this is illustrative of what we've been teaching. Is you said I have a heart too, and I know that you actually started hearing God's voice right away.
Right away. That was the beginning of transformation. But I have to tell you, the transformation continues.
Yeah.
I mean, you don't get to the end of
you
understanding, Jesus or God or that relationship, and it's joyous.
Yeah.
It really is.
Yeah, and that's again what Kathy and I have taught is that you don't need a maturity, a length of time, a seminary graduate. It's just a heart, and Rich and Janet are illustrative of, well, yeah, I'd like to. And God said, great, welcome. Let me start talking to you. And you did, and you've expressed it. And we'll talk a little bit about the beauty, which is, I think, why our ministry is so effective, and all of you guys are part of it, is there's a purity of just receiving and giving it away.
Yes.
There isn't any agenda. There isn't any other agenda. It's just receive it and give it away. And we want you connected to God and enjoy that beautiful life. And then Janet, you can share a little bit from your perspective. You had a little bit, took a little bit longer, and
took
a little bit
longer for me to
on
get
your
there.
part.
Yeah, I was sort of dragged kicking and screaming to my first abiding retreat, and I don't think I got a lot out of it. I was there, I was present. I was not sure that I wanted to be there, and so we came again. And I think the third time I came, I was, the cases, and Dave Dunkel, who was hosting these, was very generous, said, well, you'll just have to come back because you're not getting it, so just let's do it again. And the third time that's when the switch flipped for me, that I really said, oh yeah, I'm hearing from God. This is an important part of my life. It became a very different experience.
So what do you think kept you coming back?
Probably the intensity of Rich. This is something he really wanted for us. I would say that was probably the main part of it. It was important to him, so it had to be important to me. I mean, that's part of a marriage, is that that this business of being equally yoked. I mean, in order for us to move forward, this had to be part of it.
Yeah.
And it wasn't like I didn't feel like I wasn't reading the Bible or doing things. There was this place where it suddenly became different.
Right.
Mm.
Right. And as you started experiencing the life of God, which is what we talk about, is that the Word is spirit and life, John 6:63, and it stands on its own. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's not, our goal and our way we approach it is we have nothing to say to you. We're not going to persuade you of anything. It's just, well, come and see. Actually, the title of our broadcast, come and see.
Yeah.
Finding truth in a world of
Yeah.
chaos, is that just come and see and let God speak to you, and then you make your own decision about it and discover truth, which is what happened to both of you. That the Word broke through, and then you said, wow, I get to have this vibrant relationship with God, and you've had it ever since. And talk about, for the audience particularly, the specifics of that. What does abiding mean to you in terms of cross-referencing, processing what he's saying, journaling? What does all that look like to you personally?
It has to start with hearing his voice, and you can get that through scripture. You can get it through journaling. There's many different ways, but it has to, we have to be hearing God's voice. And I wasn't particularly good at journaling. So I'd start out, I might write down some scripture, and then I'd ask a question. And the more that my relationship with Jesus grew, actually, the more I trusted, and I started asking more and more difficult questions. And there were times I remember where it was very intense, where I'd ask a question and my hand would start writing. I literally it was just writing and writing and writing, and I had to go back and read what I wrote even a day or a couple of days later, and I said, I wrote that, and no, I guess I really didn't, but that's yet another benefit of journaling, is that you ask hard questions and God will find a way to communicate. And journaling itself has evolved for me. I've written down scripture that's favorite, and Janet and I will read it at night just before we go to bed. There have been so many times when God has interceded in our lives, where I started writing down these experiences, and I'm my ultimate goal is to write them down into a place, and I'm calling it a book of miracles. So but you don't start there. You start out with gosh, I'm really not good at writing, and I don't, this is something Rich told me I need to do, and but after a while you start doing it more and more, and you experience joy. Why? Because your relationship with the Lord is transforming things.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Janet, how about you?
I love to journal. I journal intermittently. I'm not a constant everyday journaler. I spend time in the Word every day, but I find that my God time, my conversation time with God, happens when I'm gardening or walking. That's when I get my time, is pulling weeds. There's something about just going out and I think I just need to keep my hands busy, but there's something about being outside and having that quiet space out there. But that's when I get most of my revelation, most of my direction, is when I'm either walking or just working in the yard, working in the garden.
And as you described that both, and you got into it and started to experience the life of God, talk about some things in your life, events in your life, decisions. One of the things Kathy and I have been talking about is discerning God's will and going to unity. How does that translated to you in a changed life? What is different now than it was before in terms of, and you can give us examples of decisions you had to make or things that you did as God was leading you in this life of His.
I think it gives us a vocabulary that we didn't have before. Sometimes it just having that vocabulary. Recently, we've had some really challenging moments, And what I've learned about that is that when it's really that challenging, that we're learning to step away for a while. There's that scripture about going to your bed whatever, and sitting there quietly by yourself,
Right.
that I think we have found to be a very useful tool for us, because we can hear each other better when we're not in the heat of the moment. But a lot of it is in just having the prayer time together. It's been real important.
The difficult times she was talking about, I won't get into a lot of details, but it was a family matter, and we were certainly under attack, and so we would come to what we thought was unity, and the family members knew all her buttons, pushed them all, and it was we got to the point where we put a deadline in place, which was something that we got to getting to unity, and we agreed that we would do this transaction, because it was a transaction, through an attorney. And we kind of warned the attorney that that we were dealing with, we didn't use terms like Satan and the enemy, but she gave us feedback saying, wow, dealing with those family members, that was vicious. And there were those kinds of terms that, so in essence, by stepping back and and just keeping with those two things that we came to unity on, it just really underscores the importance of especially when you're under attack or things are not going well, it's critical to seek God's voice, seek
And
his guidance,
protection. I felt
and
very
well, every time they pulled her out of unity, because they would go and attack her, she would leave God's protection and then get pummeled. And it was, got to the point where, we really did need to work through an attorney.
Yeah. And as you've experienced it, and that as you're receiving it, called to give it away.
Covenant,
has to be a blessing. Receive it and give it, which is true for everybody. How has that changed you? Because you're very active in giving it away in lots of different scenarios. So talk a little bit about how God has brought you people to give it away to. What does that look like to give it away, and what has that done for you guys in terms of your walk and your heart with God?
It's made it stronger. It's made it much stronger. I just we disciple a number of people over the phone, which is just, I don't know. I found that Zoom and the phone sometimes is a very nice way to spend an hour with somebody and then just be able to keep coming back to it. And there's this one couple that we've known her since she first started working for Rich many, many years ago. And she sort of chose Rich as a mentor. And it's grown from a professional to, just business to a spiritual relationship. And just watching them grow is over these years has been pretty special. And we're growing too. I mean, right now we've been rereading the book of Acts. Well, to spend that much time going through it with somebody who's never done it before,
right?
We learn so much more every time we do it.
Yeah. And when you say discipling, and you're doing it over the phone, which by the way is a normal and typical way of doing it, what does that mean? You're discipling them. What is that? How you define that?
I think it's I honestly, you've been a great mentor, and as Jesus is the perfect role model, I always look to, well, what would Jesus do in a case like this? And he's always done perfect role modeling, and so we'll be going through Scripture, and just like the very first time I heard God's voice, now I'm helping others hear God's voice. And it's we had this conversation about leadership, and it's really just facilitating somebody hearing God's voice. It has nothing to do with any special talents that I've got, certainly. But it's helping them hear God's voice and understand his nature, to be able to do His will.
Yeah.
And to choose to do so.
Yeah.
And help others get to the point of the covenant.
Facilitate's a good word.
Yeah. And as you think about that, because I know you've been active in lots and lots and lots of people's lives, and you're certainly, as you've expressed it, that brings you great joy.
It really does. They oftentimes people will say, "Well, I really want to thank you," and I go, "You're gaining something from this, true, but I'm probably gaining even more."
Right.
Just by walking, with. And there's so many times when, I'm sure this has happened to you as well. You'd read a scripture you must have read a dozen times before, and all of a sudden you see something brand new, and it just takes it to a whole different depth of relationship.
And without, you don't have to name names, but what are some of the experiences that you've seen with people who are discipling? Are being discipled by you, and they're coming into that abiding relationship themselves. What kind of things have happened?
It goes back to transformation.
Yeah.
There was one individual when I first started the conversation. I said, so what are your faith practices? And they had to think about it, and they said, I guess I'm a non-practicing Hindu. And I said, oh, we're just starting at a different place on the to-do list. and we basically, I said, would you be interested in hearing about, Jesus Christ? And it was quiet, because, people have to process it. And the answer was yes. And I mean, watching this blossom and watching God work in this person's life has been amazing. And that's, not a unique discipling story.
Yeah.
And I just think about during the abiding retreats, there's always those moments on that final morning when we're doing the Ezekiel and the people, and there's things that happen during those times that years later are still resonating, which, amazingly.
Yep.
I think even some of what you're talking about, Rich and I this week have been talking about in the context of discerning God's will. We've been in Deuteronomy, is it Deuteronomy 28? 28 that we've been talking about, and talking about how the blessings overtake you. As you're listening to Him, as you're following what He leads, the blessings literally overtake you. And that side, when we start giving it away, we get to watch the blessings overtake people.
Yeah.
And that in and of itself overtakes us with blessing. There's so many layers to the way God simply blesses our lives and fills it with joy as we simply walk with Him and follow what He says. And you guys are expressing that.
And as God so orchestrates, it's that what you're receiving, I'm going to call you to give it away. And we have an interesting, what happened with, remember our last guest, Kathy, was Rick and Kelly Ferris last week. And they know, because they're, New England, they know Rich and Janet, got to be friends with them.
Right.
Tell us a little bit about how you came to disciple his son and daughter-in-law. And then you've been
I forgot that there was that
instrumental
connection
in that, and then you could even talk about how far it's gone, because now John is having learned it. Well, he's given it away.
He surely
and see,
is.
that's what we're trying to describe it. That, as you said it well, is when we say discipleship, it's inviting people to Christ, and the Holy Spirit has a path for them. We're just going to walk alongside of them, and get them connected, and then enjoy the process with the knowledge. And this is true. If you learn to abide, one of the things that will be part of the life will be, well, I'm going to ask you to give it away. And you get to see what I call offspring. So John, Ferris, and Faith. And then, by the way, now they're giving it away, interesting enough, to a whole company. And, you and me, we'll never see those people, likely. but we know that fruit is going on. But tell us a little bit, how did that come about, and that you guys got to become so instrumental in actually being the ones to facilitate the discipleship of these two guys?
What's your story?
Well, so you know, I'll try to make it as brief as possible. But you know, Rick, John, and I were you know, watching some sporting event, and you were talking about coaching, and you know, and somehow I said to John, you know, you know, you've heard about us doing abiding retreats and whatnot. You know, would you like to participate in something like that? And you know, if you don't, what was the probability of him saying yes?
Yeah.
It was, you know, he's
At the
I
time,
don't know.
he was a college student.
He was a college student, and yeah,
wasn't sure
just
where he was
finishing up.
going, where
Didn't
he
know
was
where he
going.
was going. I'd heard some of the places he'd been, and it was a good thing he was going somewhere else. But in any case, he jumped at the chance, and I said, this is interesting. So we just, you know, we not only went through abiding, but you know, we've been through a number. We're currently going through the covenant, and you know, somewhere along the way, you've been talking about, you know, multiplication.
Yep.
And somewhere along the way, I happened to mention multiplication to John, and so you know, John basically is in a new role in his company. He's training people all over the country, and so he trains people, and then probably about 70% of that population wants to come back and participate in the abiding study that we originally started with.
Wow.
It's amazing, and I had no idea until he told me.
But to go back to the beginning, you know, Rich was going through abiding. With John, and John and Faith had just started dating. I mean, it was a very fresh relationship. And so John, I think you were just about finished with the abiding. He asked if Rich or I would do the same study with Faith. So we decided that it would be better if Faith and I did it separately for them. So while they were meeting, I started meeting with Faith, and we were doing this all on the phone because the kids are down in Carolina somewhere. And so I went through it with her, and it was an opportunity for them again to give them a place of a equal yoking of a, you know, common experience. So they have just blossomed from there. It's just been amazing that they, you know, but they've brought 2 different groups up to our house for retreats.
Yep.
We've planned the next retreat already with, you know, the original group, and you know, and we're watching them, you know, not only abiding. See, I mean, we can talk about all of this stuff as though it's, this is theology, and this is, you know, isn't it wonderful? But to me, what good is it if you don't practically apply it?
Absolutely.
I mean, put it into your life and make it part of your life. And so they had an issue that they were dealing with, where to live, and you know, they moved into an apartment, happened to have lead paint, so you know, they were looking to move on to that, and Faith felt pretty strongly that there was this townhouse condo that was the answer to all their dreams, and John felt differently. And so I said, all right, well, what's God saying to you? And he said, this isn't it. He said, I know God has something better for me. And so I said, all right, then, you know, it's your job to stand. And you know, you guys need to get to unity on this. They passed that by. And once again, long story short, as you know, the housing market's ridiculous right now.
Yeah.
Right.
And
right.
you know, so people are making cash offers above asking price and so on and
yes.
so forth. And they've been trying to play in that game, and they haven't been winning it at all. And so they decided, well, they didn't decide, an opportunity came to them on a private sale with somebody that Rick had known forever as part of his church, and you know, he knew him professionally and so on. And so this house wasn't even on the market, and they're asking a reasonable price, not a ridiculous price. So they're going to be closing on this house And it was originally, Faith said, I don't know, really know. And finally, after, walking and trying to get to unity on this housing issue, she went to see it, and it was beautiful.
Yeah.
They're going to be closing on this house on August 17th, but it just goes to show, stay in abiding, get to unity with the Lord. He's got something better for all of us. And if we don't agree, it's okay.
Yeah.
Park it and let God work.
Regardless of timing,
And
right?
God's will is what we say best and then better.
Yes.
That proved out to be true. And so as we wrap up here, I guess the simple question is there anything better than giving it away?
Oh, no, what a gift that is.
Yeah. And by the way, in order to give it away, what's required?
You have to be abiding.
You got to be receiving it. You got to be living it out. And that's how. See, I believe that's how the early church grew. Yeah, is that
absolutely
people were experiencing God, and then they gave it away to others who learned to experience God, and then they gave it away to others who learned to experience God. And we know something is it's just give it away, and giving it away is just having other people learn the beautiful relationship with God and experience that as we are.
Yeah, it's sharing what we know by experience.
Yeah. So we're so honored that you guys shared your story with us, and the audience is going to be really thrilled by it. Thank you so much.
Thank
for
you.
doing it. We'll try to do it again. Maybe we could do it with John and Faith.
I think
Be
that
great.
would be fun.
Oh, that would be fun.
That would be kind of fun.
Yeah.
Maybe even Rick and Kelly. That would be a hoot. Wouldn't that be a hoot to do that? So maybe we'll get creative, Kathy, and figure out how to
there
do
you
that.
go.
So with Zoom, we can get them all on at the same time, so that'll be fun. So anyway, thank you so much. We love you guys, and we're just excited. And Kathy, again, what could be more fun to have guest day? And tomorrow, by the way, is going to be End Times Friday, so join us tomorrow as we go further into the discussion of the end times and how important that is. And we'll go to the next phase. We're going to be talking more about Daniel's beast tomorrow, so come and enjoy that.
Very interesting stuff. So thanks again for joining us, everyone. Thank you, Rich and
Kathy.
Janet. Such a joy. If you found today encouraging or inspirational, please be a friend and tell a friend. We are enjoying having a growing audience. And honestly, only reason we're enjoying having a growing audience is we know that means more people are hearing how to hear the voice of God. And we're hearing story after story of people's walks coming alive. So thanks for joining. Thanks for sharing. Have a great day, everybody.
Thank
You
you.
too.
See you, Kathy.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Hope to see you soon.
Thank you for joining us for today's episode of Come and See, your podcast for truth in a world of chaos. Brought to you by All for Jesus Living Waters Ministry. Send us your questions and comments, and tune in tomorrow for more answers to your personal questions about living life in God's truth. Remember, God's will is best and none better. His truth brings peace in this world of chaos.